The storm hit the city hard that night, rain pouring down in heavy sheets, lightning flashing across the dark sky. Inside a quiet penthouse overlooking the city, Mia sat wrapped in a warm blanket, watching the storm through large glass windows, feeling more peaceful than she had in years. Beside her stood Nikolai Volkov, a man most people feared, though tonight, none of that darkness showed in his expression. He watched Mia quietly, his usually guarded eyes soft, almost vulnerable. "You're staring," Mia teased gently, glancing over at him with a small smile. "Can't help it," Nikolai admitted honestly, moving closer to sit beside her. "You make it very difficult to look away." Mia laughed softly, leaning her head against his shoulder. She had met Nikolai only a few months earlier, through mutual friends at a quiet dinner party, unaware at first of the dangerous world he truly belonged to. When she eventually learned the truth about him, she should have run. Instead, she stayed, drawn to the quiet strength and unexpected gentleness he always showed only to her. Tonight was special, different somehow, their first night truly alone together, away from constant guards, phone calls, and the pressures of Nikolai's dangerous world. For a few precious hours, it felt like they were simply two ordinary people, deeply in love, nothing more complicated than that. "I don't want tonight to end," Mia whispered softly, watching the storm outside grow stronger. Nikolai gently took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Then let's make sure we remember every single detail," he said quietly, kissing her forehead tenderly. "So no matter what happens after tonight, we'll always have this memory." Mia smiled, feeling safe and loved in a way she'd never truly experienced before. She had no idea that fate would soon test those very words in the cruelest way imaginable. Later that night, after their quiet dinner and slow dancing to soft music playing from an old record player Nikolai kept for such rare occasions, Mia reluctantly prepared to leave, needing to return home before the storm worsened further. "Stay," Nikolai suggested gently, though he understood her need for independence, respecting her decision despite his own reluctance to let her go. "I'll be fine," Mia reassured him with a soft laugh, kissing him lightly before grabbing her coat. "Besides, you have an early meeting tomorrow, remember?" Nikolai sighed but nodded, walking her down to her car himself, holding an umbrella carefully above her head despite the storm's intensity. At her car, he pulled her into one final, lingering kiss. "Drive safely," he said softly, his voice filled with a tenderness few had ever witnessed from him. "Always," Mia promised, smiling brightly one last time before climbing into her car and driving off into the storm. Nikolai watched her car disappear into the rain, an unusual, uneasy feeling settling deep within his chest, though he quickly dismissed it as simple worry from the intense storm outside. He would later realize that feeling wasn't simple worry at all. It was a warning, one he desperately wished he had listened to more carefully. Barely 20 minutes after leaving Nikolai's penthouse, Mia's car hit a patch of water on a sharp turn, losing control completely. The car spun wildly, crashing hard into a guardrail before flipping over completely, coming to a violent stop in a ditch alongside the road. When Nikolai received the emergency call less than an hour later, informing him that Mia had been involved in a serious accident, his entire world shattered instantly. He rushed immediately to the hospital, ignoring every safety protocol his own men insisted upon, driven purely by fear and desperation. At the hospital, doctors informed him gravely that Mia had survived, though barely, suffering severe trauma to her head during the crash. She was stable now, resting quietly, but the doctors warned him carefully about potential memory loss due to the severity of her injury. Nikolai barely listened to the medical explanations, desperate simply to see her, to know she was truly safe. When he finally entered her hospital room, relief flooded through him instantly at the sight of her lying peacefully, alive and breathing steadily. But as Mia slowly opened her eyes, blinking tiredly at him, her expression held none of the warmth or recognition Nikolai desperately hoped to see. "Mia," he whispered gently, moving closer to her bedside, taking her hand carefully. Mia stared at him, confusion clear in her tired eyes. "I'm sorry," she said softly, her voice weak and uncertain. "Do I know you?" Nikolai froze, his entire body going cold with shock and disbelief. "Mia, it's me," he said quietly, desperately searching her eyes for any sign of recognition. "It's Nikolai." Mia shook her head slowly, clearly struggling to understand. I don't remember," she admitted, tears forming in her confused eyes. "I'm sorry, I really don't know who you are." Nikolai's heart shattered completely in that single devastating moment. The woman he loved deeply, the woman who had promised only hours earlier to always remember their night together, now looked at him as a complete stranger. Doctors quickly entered, gently explaining to Nikolai privately that Mia's memory loss appeared significant, likely affecting several months, possibly longer, though they couldn't yet determine exactly how much she had truly forgotten. Nikolai stood outside her hospital room afterward, staring silently through the small window, watching Mia rest peacefully, completely unaware of everything they had shared together, everything they had promised each other only hours before. For the first time in years, Nikolai Volkov, feared Mafia Boss, felt utterly powerless, gripped by pain he had no idea how to control or overcome. Somehow, someway he knew clearly he had to find a way back into her heart again, even if it meant starting completely from the beginning. Weeks passed since the accident. Mia had been released from the hospital and was slowly adjusting to her new reality, a life with gaps in her memory, missing pieces that no doctor could fully explain or restore. She had learned to accept it, mostly filling her days with work and quiet routines, though sometimes a strange, unsettling feeling would wash over her, as if something important was missing from her life. She had no idea that the missing piece was a man named Nikolai Volkov, a man who now watched her carefully from a distance, unwilling to disappear completely from her life, yet uncertain how to properly return to it. Nikolai sat quietly in his office, staring blankly at old photographs of Mia on his phone, memories of their night together replaying painfully in his mind. Marcus, his most trusted friend and enforcer, watched him carefully from across the room. "Boss," Marcus said gently, breaking the heavy silence, "you can't keep doing this to yourself. Watching her from a distance isn't going to bring her memories back." Nikolai looked up, his eyes tired and pained. "I can't just disappear from her life completely, Marcus. Even if she doesn't remember me, I remember everything. I can't just walk away." "Then what's your plan?" Marcus asked carefully. "You can't tell her the truth all at once. She has no memory of your world, of what you do or how deeply you were involved with each other. It could overwhelm her completely." Nikolai sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "I know," he admitted. "That's why I need to approach this carefully, slowly. I'll re-enter her life quietly as someone new, someone she can trust again, without revealing everything all at once." Marcus studied him seriously. "And if she never remembers? What then?" Nikolai's expression hardened with quiet determination. "Then I'll make her fall in love with me again, memories or not." The next day, Nikolai carefully arranged to reintroduce himself into Mia's life. He learned she now worked part-time at a small bookstore near her apartment, a job she had taken up recently while slowly recovering from her accident. Nikolai walked into the quiet bookstore, his heart pounding nervously, an unfamiliar feeling for a man usually so composed and controlled. Mia looked up from behind the counter, offering a polite, professional smile to the new customer. "Welcome. Let me know if you need help finding anything." Nikolai forced a calm smile, though inside, seeing her look at him without any recognition broke his heart all over again. "Actually, I'm looking for a recommendation," he said carefully. "Something calming maybe. I've had a difficult few weeks." Mia studied him thoughtfully, professional curiosity showing in her expression. "I think I have just the thing," she said, walking toward a nearby shelf. She picked a book carefully, handing it to him with a warm smile. "This one always helps me feel more grounded when things get overwhelming." Nikolai took the book carefully, their fingers briefly touching. For a brief second, Mia paused, an odd, unexplainable feeling washing over her, though she quickly dismissed it as simple imagination. "Thank you," Nikolai said softly, watching her carefully, hoping desperately she would recognize something familiar in his voice or his touch. But the moment passed quickly, and Mia's polite smile remained unchanged, void of any deeper memory. "Of course," she replied simply. "Let me know if you enjoy it." Nikolai left the bookstore that day feeling a strange mixture of hope and heartbreak. Though Mia hadn't remembered him, that brief flicker of confusion in her eyes gave him a small, fragile hope to hold on to. Over the following weeks, Nikolai visited the bookstore regularly, carefully building a friendly, casual relationship with Mia under the guise of being simply a customer who enjoyed her book recommendations. Slowly, gradually, Mia began looking forward to his visits, enjoying their quiet conversations about books, art, and life, unaware of the deep history hidden beneath their new, careful friendship. One afternoon, as they sat together during a quiet moment in the bookstore, Mia looked at Nikolai curiously. "You know, it's strange," she said thoughtfully. "I feel like I've known you longer than I actually have. Does that sound crazy?" Nikolai's heart skipped, cautious hope rising within him. "Not crazy at all," he said gently. "Sometimes people just feel familiar, even if we can't fully explain why." Mia smiled softly, though confusion flickered briefly across her face. "Maybe," she said quietly, though clearly unconvinced completely by her own explanation. Nikolai carefully hid his emotions, unwilling to push too hard too soon. He understood clearly that pushing Mia to remember too quickly could risk damaging her fragile trust, or worse, overwhelming her completely. But as Nikolai carefully built this fragile connection, dangerous eyes watched quietly from the shadows. Sergei Molotov, an old rival from Nikolai's past, someone who had long awaited an opportunity for revenge against him, had discovered Mia's existence and her connection to Nikolai. Sergei smiled coldly, watching quietly from a parked car outside the bookstore as Nikolai finally left for the day. Interesting, he murmured to himself. It seems Nikolai Volkov finally has a weakness worth exploiting. As Nikolai walked away, completely unaware of the danger quietly gathering around Mia once again, Sergei began carefully planning his next dangerous move, one that would threaten not only Mia's safety, but everything Nikolai had carefully begun rebuilding between them. Weeks turned into a comfortable routine. Mia looked forward to Nikolai's visits at the bookstore more than she cared to admit. There was something steady about him, something that made her feel safe, even though she still couldn't fully explain the strange familiarity she often felt in his presence. One quiet afternoon, while organizing books near the back shelves, Mia suddenly paused, a sharp flash crossing her mind, the feeling of rain against the car window, the sound of soft music playing somewhere distant, and a warm hand holding hers. She gripped the shelf tightly, momentarily dizzy from the unexpected sensation. "Mia? Are you all right?" Nikolai's voice broke through, concern clear in his tone as he moved quickly toward her. Mia blinked, the strange flash fading as quickly as it appeared. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice trembled slightly. "I just had this strange feeling. Like a memory almost. But it's gone now." Nikolai's heart raced with cautious hope, though he carefully hid his reaction. "Do you want to sit down for a moment?" he asked gently, guiding her carefully to a nearby chair. Mia nodded, rubbing her temples softly. "It's happened a few times before," she admitted quietly. "My doctor says it might just be my mind trying to reconstruct memories from before my accident. But it's confusing, honestly. Sometimes I feel like I'm remembering things but they don't make sense." Nikolai listened carefully, torn between wanting desperately to explain everything to her and knowing he needed to remain patient, careful not to overwhelm her fragile progress. "Memories can be strange like that," he said gently. "Sometimes they return slowly, piece by piece." Mia studied him closely, something thoughtful and curious crossing her expression. "You always seem to understand exactly what I need to hear," she said softly. "It's strange considering we've only known each other a few weeks." Nikolai smiled gently, though sadness flickered briefly in his eyes. "Maybe some connections don't need much time to feel right," he said quietly. Meanwhile, across town, Sergei Molotov carefully continued his research into Mia's life, patiently building a plan to exploit the situation. He learned quickly about her memory loss, her ongoing friendship with Nikolai, and the fragile trust slowly rebuilding between them. "She has no idea who he truly is," Sergei mused quietly to one of his men. "No memory of the dangerous world he belongs to, or the risks that come with loving him." "What's your plan, boss?" his associate asked curiously. Sergei smiled coldly. "We use her ignorance against Nikolai. If she learns the truth about him from us first, framed carefully in the worst possible way, we can turn her against him completely, destroying the one thing he clearly cares about most." Back at the bookstore, unaware of the danger quietly approaching, Mia continued spending time with Nikolai, their friendship deepening naturally with each passing day. One evening, as they walked together along a quiet street after closing the store, Mia hesitated, turning to face him directly. "Nikolai," she said softly, "can I ask you something honestly?" "Of course," he replied gently, though nervousness flickered briefly across his expression. "Have we met before?" "Before all of this, I mean," Mia asked carefully. "Sometimes when I'm with you, it feels like there's history between us, something deeper than just these past few weeks." Nikolai's heart pounded heavily, torn between honesty and caution. He wanted desperately to tell her everything, to explain their entire history together, the love they had shared, the promises they had made. But he understood clearly the risk involved in revealing too much too soon. "We've crossed paths before," he admitted carefully, choosing his words cautiously. "But it's complicated, Mia. I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information before you're ready." Mia studied him closely, clearly sensing he was holding something back, though she didn't push further, trusting instead in the comfort and safety she already felt around him. "Okay," she said softly. "I trust you'll tell me when you're ready." Nikolai nodded gratefully, relief flooding through him at her patience and trust, even without full understanding. "Thank you," he said quietly, meaning it deeply. As they continued walking quietly together, neither noticed a car parked discreetly nearby, watching carefully from a distance. Inside, Sergei observed quietly, patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike, understanding clearly that patience often proved far more powerful than reckless action. "Soon," Sergei murmured quietly to himself, watching Nikolai and Mia disappear around a corner. "Soon, Nikolai, you'll understand exactly how it feels to lose everything you love all over again." Unaware of the danger quietly closing in around them, Mia and Nikolai continued walking together through the quiet evening streets, their fragile connection slowly strengthening, completely unaware that a storm far more dangerous than any weather was quickly approaching, ready to test everything they had carefully begun rebuilding together. A few days later, Mia was closing up the bookstore alone, the evening quiet and calm. As she locked the front door and turned to leave, a well-dressed woman approached her, smiling politely. "Mia Bennett?" the woman asked warmly. Mia paused, surprised. "Yes? Do I know you?" "Not exactly," the woman said gently. "My name is Elena. I used to work closely with someone you've recently become friends with, Nikolai Volkov." Mia's expression shifted with curiosity. "You know Nikolai?" Elena, secretly working for Sergei, nodded carefully, her tone laced with practiced concern. "I do. And honestly, Mia, I think you deserve to know some things about him before you get too close." Mia's stomach tightened uneasily. "What kind of things?" Elena glanced around cautiously, as if worried about being overheard, though it was simply part of her carefully rehearsed performance. "Can we talk somewhere private? It's important." Reluctantly, Mia agreed, leading Elena to a quiet cafe nearby. Once seated, Elena leaned forward, her expression carefully sympathetic. "Nikolai isn't who he seems, Mia. He's involved in dangerous business, organized crime, violence. People have been hurt, even killed, because of decisions he's made." Mia felt her chest tighten with shock and confusion. "That can't be right," she said quietly, though doubt already crept into her voice. "He's never shown me anything like that." "Of course not," Elena said gently, her tone carefully calculated. "Men like him are skilled at hiding their true nature, especially from people they want something from." "What do you mean, want something from me?" Mia asked, unease growing rapidly. Elena hesitated, feigning reluctance perfectly. "I probably shouldn't say this, but I've heard him discussing you before, using words like controlling her and keeping her close for leverage." "I'm sorry, Mia. I just felt you deserved to know the truth." Mia sat in stunned silence, her mind spinning with confusion and betrayal. Everything she had believed about Nikolai over the past weeks suddenly felt uncertain, tainted by doubt and suspicion. "Why are you telling me this?" Mia finally asked, her voice trembling slightly. Elena reached out gently, placing a comforting hand on Mia's arm. "Because I once trusted him too, and I paid dearly for that mistake. I don't want the same thing happening to you." After Elena left, Mia sat alone at the cafe, her thoughts racing anxiously. She wanted desperately to dismiss what she'd just heard, yet doubt lingered stubbornly, especially considering Nikolai's own hesitance to share details about their supposed past connection. That evening, when Nikolai arrived at her apartment for their usual quiet dinner together, Mia's demeanor had changed noticeably, tension evident in her tight smile and distant eyes. "Is everything all right?" Nikolai asked carefully, sensing immediately something was wrong. "I met someone today," Mia said quietly, watching his reaction closely. "Elena. She said she used to work with you." Nikolai's expression tightened instantly, alarm bells ringing sharply in his mind. "Elena? What did she tell you?" Mia studied him carefully, noticing his sudden tension. "She said you're involved in dangerous things, Nikolai. That you might be using me somehow, keeping me close for some kind of leverage." Her voice trembled slightly. "Is that true?" Nikolai felt his heart clench painfully, understanding immediately the danger of Sergei's calculated interference. "Mia, listen to me carefully," he said firmly though gently. "Elena doesn't work for me. She works for a dangerous rival of mine named Sergei Molotov. He's trying to manipulate you against me." Mia's eyes narrowed with confusion and hurt. "How do I know you're telling the truth, Nikolai? You've never fully explained our history, and now suddenly there's this whole dangerous world you've hidden from me." Nikolai sighed heavily, realizing painfully that his careful, cautious approach had backfired dangerously. "I wanted to protect you," he admitted honestly. "I was afraid revealing everything too quickly might overwhelm you, especially given your memory loss." "Protect me or control me?" Mia asked quietly, doubt evident in her tone. Nikolai's chest tightened painfully at her words, realizing clearly how deeply Sergei's manipulation had already begun to damage the fragile trust they'd carefully built. "Mia, please," he said softly, desperation clear in his voice. "I would never hurt you or use you. Everything I've done has been because I care deeply about you." Mia studied him closely, torn between the trust she had slowly built with him and the unsettling doubts Elena had planted so carefully. "I need some time, Nikolai," she said quietly, stepping back slightly. "I need to think clearly about all of this." Nikolai nodded reluctantly, understanding he couldn't force her trust, especially now that dangerous doubts had been planted so deliberately. "Take whatever time you need," he said softly, though pain clearly filled his voice. "But please be careful, Mia. Sergei is dangerous, and if he's already approached you once, he won't stop there." As Nikolai left quietly that evening, Mia sat alone, confusion and uncertainty swirling deeply within her. She had no idea that the doubts now clouding her mind were carefully planted seeds, deliberately placed to separate her completely from the one person who genuinely cared for her safety and happiness. Meanwhile, watching quietly from a distance, Sergei smiled coldly, pleased with Elena's success. "Perfect," he murmured softly. "Now, let's make sure this doubt grows into something Nikolai can never fully repair." Unaware of the growing danger surrounding her, Mia found herself trapped now in a dangerous web of doubt and manipulation, uncertain who to trust as Sergei's dangerous plan continued unfolding exactly as he had intended. Days passed and Mia kept her distance from Nikolai, her mind still tangled in doubt. She tried to focus on work, on her quiet routine, but nothing felt right anymore. The comfort she once felt around Nikolai now sat beside a nagging uncertainty she couldn't shake off. One evening, walking home from the bookstore, Mia noticed a car following slowly behind her. At first, she dismissed it as coincidence, but when it turned down the same quiet street she lived on, slowing even further, her heart began to race with unease. Suddenly, the car stopped and two men stepped out quickly, moving toward her with clear intent. Panic surged through Mia as she turned to run, but one of the men grabbed her arm roughly. "Let go of me," Mia shouted, struggling desperately against his grip. "Sergei just wants to talk," the man said coldly, pulling her toward the car. Mia fought back, but the men were far stronger. Just as she felt hopeless, a familiar car screeched to a stop nearby, and Nikolai jumped out, fury blazing in his eyes. "Let her go," Nikolai growled dangerously, moving quickly toward them. The men hesitated, clearly recognizing him, though they didn't release Mia immediately. Nikolai didn't wait for further discussion. He moved fast, disarming one man swiftly while forcefully pulling Mia free from the other's grip. "Mia, get behind me," he ordered firmly, positioning himself protectively between her and the remaining attacker. The fight was brief but intense, Nikolai's skill and controlled fury quickly overwhelming both men, who eventually fled, clearly unwilling to continue the confrontation against him directly. Breathing heavily, Nikolai turned quickly to Mia, checking carefully for any injuries. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently, concern etched deeply into his expression. Mia shook her head, though her body trembled from shock and fear. "I'm okay," she whispered. "Thank you for coming." Nikolai gently pulled her into a careful, protective embrace, relief flooding through him at her safety. As he held her closely, Mia suddenly felt an unexpected wave of familiarity wash powerfully over her, stronger than anything she had felt before. Flashes of memory suddenly surged through her mind, rain falling heavily outside a large window, soft music playing quietly in the background, Nikolai's gentle voice promising to always remember their night together. Mia gasped softly, pulling back slightly, staring at him with wide, shocked eyes. "Nikolai?" she whispered, her voice trembling with confusion and emotion. I think I'm starting to remember something." Nikolai's heart pounded rapidly, cautious hope rising sharply within him. "What do you remember, Mia?" he asked softly, careful not to overwhelm her. "Rain," Mia said slowly, struggling to piece together fragmented images. "Music." Holding my hand, promising something important. She paused, confusion evident in her voice. "I don't understand what it means, but it feels so real." Nikolai gently took her hands in his voice soft but filled with emotion. "That night was real, Mia. We shared something incredibly special together, right before your accident." Tears formed in Mia's eyes as fragmented memories continued surfacing slowly, painfully. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked quietly, though her tone held less anger now, more confusion and vulnerability. "I was afraid," Nikolai admitted honestly. Afraid that revealing everything too quickly might overwhelm you, or make things more complicated and painful. Mia looked at him carefully, emotions swirling deeply within her. I need time to understand everything, she said softly. But I don't think you're the dangerous person Elena tried to convince me you were. Nikolai gently squeezed her hands reassuringly. Take whatever time you need, Mia. I'm not going anywhere. As they stood quietly together outside her apartment, unaware of watching eyes nearby, Sergei observed silently from a distance, anger and frustration evident in his expression at witnessing his plan unravel unexpectedly. This isn't over, Sergei muttered darkly to himself, watching Nikolai gently escort Mia safely inside her apartment building. If anything, this makes things even more interesting. Meanwhile, inside her apartment, Mia sat quietly with Nikolai, carefully processing the flood of emotions and fragmented memories now surfacing rapidly within her. Though many questions remained unanswered, one thing had become undeniably clear to her. Despite everything, despite the danger and uncertainty surrounding Nikolai's world, her heart still remembered him, even when her mind had temporarily forgotten. I think, Mia said softly, looking directly into Nikolai's eyes, that I'm starting to trust you again. Nikolai felt profound relief and hope flooding through him, understanding clearly that despite everything they still had to overcome, they had finally taken the first crucial step back toward each other. But with Sergei's anger now intensifying dangerously after tonight's failed attempt, Nikolai understood clearly that greater danger still awaited them both, danger that would soon test everything they had carefully begun rebuilding together once again. In the days following the attack, Mia's memories continued returning slowly, small fragments piecing together gradually into a clearer picture of her past with Nikolai. Every quiet evening they spent together, sitting closely on her small couch, brought back another piece of what they had once shared. A shared laugh at dinner, a quiet walk in the rain, the warmth of his hand around hers. Though the picture was becoming clearer, Mia still felt caution mixed with her growing affection, aware deeply of the dangerous world Nikolai belonged to, and the very real threat Sergei still posed to their safety. You've been quiet tonight, Nikolai observed gently, watching Mia carefully as they sat together one evening, the city lights glowing softly outside her apartment window. I keep thinking about Sergei, Mia admitted honestly. About what happened and what could happen again if he decides to try something else. Nikolai's expression tightened, guilt and concern evident in his eyes. I promise you, Mia, I won't let him hurt you again, he said firmly. But you're right to be cautious. Sergei doesn't easily give up, especially now that he understands how much you mean to me. Mia studied him closely, worry clear in her voice. What if confronting him directly is the only way to truly end this? To keep both of us safe permanently? Nikolai considered her words carefully, understanding the risk involved, yet recognizing painfully that avoiding direct confrontation might only prolong their danger indefinitely. If it comes to that, he said slowly, I need you to trust me completely and stay safe no matter what happens. Mia nodded firmly, determination clear in her eyes despite lingering fear. I trust you, Nikolai. Completely. Just days later, Nikolai received information from Marcus regarding Sergei's whereabouts. An isolated warehouse outside the city, where Sergei had reportedly gathered several of his men, preparing for what appeared to be a final, decisive move against Nikolai. We move tonight, Nikolai declared firmly, gathering his most trusted men quickly. I want this ended once and for all. Despite Nikolai's insistence that she remain safely behind, Mia firmly refused to stay away, determined instead to face this danger directly alongside him. I've spent enough time hiding and running from fear, she said firmly. I want to help end this, Nikolai. Together. Reluctantly, understanding her determination clearly, Nikolai agreed, carefully devising a plan to keep her protected as closely as possible during the confrontation. That night, Nikolai's men quietly surrounded Sergei's warehouse, carefully positioning themselves before moving in swiftly and decisively. Nikolai personally led the charge, Mia following closely behind him, her heart pounding heavily with anticipation and fear. Inside the warehouse, Sergei stood confidently, seemingly expecting their arrival. Nikolai, he said calmly, mockery evident in his tone. And you brought her along this time. Bold move. This ends tonight, Sergei, Nikolai said firmly, his voice steady and controlled despite the intense danger surrounding them. No more manipulation, no more threats against her safety. Sergei laughed coldly. Then let's finish this properly. Chaos erupted instantly as Sergei's men opened fire, Nikolai quickly pulling Mia behind cover as his own men engaged fiercely in the ensuing battle. Bullets echoed loudly through the warehouse, tension and danger thick in the air. Amid the chaos, Sergei attempted to slip away quietly, but Nikolai anticipated his move, quickly cutting off his escape route. Going somewhere? Nikolai asked coldly, blocking Sergei's path directly. Sergei's confidence faltered slightly, realizing he was now trapped. This isn't finished, Nikolai, he warned, desperation creeping subtly into his voice. Yes, Nikolai said firmly, it is. A brief, intense struggle ensued, Nikolai's controlled fury quickly overpowering Sergei completely. Within moments, Sergei was subdued, his remaining men surrendering swiftly once their leader had been defeated. As the chaos finally settled, Nikolai quickly moved back toward Mia, relief flooding through him at finding her safe, though shaken from the intense confrontation. Are you all right? He asked urgently, checking carefully for any injuries. Mia nodded, adrenaline and relief evident clearly in her expression. I'm okay, she reassured him softly. It's finally over. Nikolai gently pulled her into a warm, relieved embrace, emotions flooding through him powerfully. Yes, he whispered softly against her hair. It's finally over. Weeks later, life slowly returned to a calmer, safer routine for both Mia and Nikolai. Mia's memories had fully returned by then, every precious detail of their original night together restored completely, filling her with warmth and certainty about the depth of their connection. Sitting together quietly one peaceful evening, watching the sunset from Nikolai's penthouse balcony, exactly where their story had first truly begun, Mia turned to him thoughtfully. I remember everything now, she said softly, smiling warmly at him. Every single detail of that night and everything we promised each other. Nikolai smiled gently, taking her hand carefully in his. And what do you think now, knowing everything clearly? He asked softly, vulnerability evident in his voice. Mia leaned closer, resting her head gently against his shoulder, love clear in her eyes. I think, she said softly, that some love is strong enough to survive, even when memories briefly fade away. Nikolai's heart swelled with deep emotion, holding her closely, grateful beyond words for the journey that had brought them back together, stronger and more certain than ever before. As the sun set gently behind them, casting warm golden light across the quiet city, Mia and Nikolai sat together peacefully, finally free from danger, fully certain now of the powerful love that had guided them faithfully back to each other, no matter what obstacles life had placed between them.